On December 21, 2025, the Supreme Court struck down President Trump's global tariffs, ending a defining era of trade protectionism. The justices ruled the president had overstepped, declaring only Congress can impose such sweeping trade measures. This decision dismantled a core pillar of the America First agenda and sent shockwaves through Washington and global markets. Billions in tariffs were invalidated, raising urgent questions about refunds and the future of U.S. trade policy. The ruling was celebrated by free trade advocates and business groups who argued the tariffs hurt consumers and strained international relationships. As the nation absorbs this historic shift, attention turns to the practical fallout: refunds, price changes, and the new balance of power in American trade. President Trump's tariffs were introduced as a bold move to protect American industries and workers from what he described as unfair foreign competition. The administration argued that countries like China, Mexico, and Canada had long benefited from trade deals that put American businesses at a disadvantage, leading to job losses and factory closures across the United States. By imposing tariffs, the goal was to level the playing field, encourage companies to bring manufacturing back home, and restore American economic strength. To implement these sweeping tariffs, the administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. By declaring a national emergency tied to the crisis of fentanyl trafficking, officials claimed they had the authority to impose broad tariffs on imports. This legal maneuver allowed the White House to bypass Congress and act quickly, framing the tariffs as a necessary response to both economic and public health threats. However, this approach sparked immediate controversy. Critics, including legal scholars and members of Congress, argued that using IEEPA in this way was an unprecedented stretch of executive power. Traditionally, IEEPA had been reserved for sanctions against hostile nations or to address clear national security threats, not to reshape trade policy on such a massive scale. For many American companies, especially those that relied on imported materials and components, the tariffs meant higher costs almost overnight. Businesses faced tough choices: absorb the extra expenses, cut jobs, or raise prices on their products. Small manufacturers and retailers, in particular, struggled to adapt to the sudden changes in their supply chains. As a result, American families began to feel the impact at the checkout line. Everyday goods, from groceries to electronics, became more expensive. Meanwhile, foreign governments retaliated with their own tariffs, targeting American exports like soybeans, cars, and machinery, which hurt U.S. farmers and manufacturers trying to sell their products abroad. Despite claims that foreign countries would pay the tariffs, the reality was that American importers bore the brunt of these new duties. For many small businesses, the added costs threatened their survival, forcing some to lay off workers or even close their doors for good. The result was a multi-front trade war that disrupted global supply chains and created uncertainty for businesses and consumers alike. Prices continued to rise, and many American households found themselves paying more for basic necessities, while companies struggled to plan for the future. As the economic and legal fallout grew, opposition to the policy intensified. Lawsuits were filed, protests erupted, and the debate over the use of emergency powers to set trade policy became a defining issue, one that would shape the future of American trade for years to come. The Supreme Court's decision was rooted in the Constitution's separation of powers. The justices found the president's use of IEEPA to impose global tariffs far exceeded executive authority. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress, not the president, the power to regulate commerce and impose taxes. The court emphasized that emergencies don't grant the president a blank check to bypass Congress. This ruling reaffirmed that only elected lawmakers can overhaul trade policy, serving as a check on executive overreach. The decision was a clear victory for constitutional order and the rule of law. The tariffs acted as a hidden tax, quietly raising prices on everyday essentials. Shoppers noticed the difference at the checkout, as groceries, household goods, and even basic necessities became more expensive almost overnight. For many families, these price hikes weren't just numbers on a receipt, they meant real sacrifices. Suddenly, sticking to a weekly budget became a challenge, and every trip to the store required tough decisions about what to buy and what to leave behind. The impact stretched beyond the grocery aisle. Electronics, clothing, and school supplies all saw price increases, making it harder for parents to provide for their children. Even small increases added up, straining household budgets and forcing families to cut back on non-essentials, delay purchases, or dip into savings just to get by. While headline GDP growth looks strong on paper, the benefits were unevenly distributed. Wealthier households could absorb higher costs, without much change to their lifestyles, but middle and working-class families felt the squeeze. Many found themselves cutting back on outings, skipping vacations, or postponing big purchases. For most Americans, the rising cost of living became impossible to ignore. Consumer confidence dropped as people grew anxious about their financial futures, and many began to worry about how they would afford upcoming expenses. The holiday season, usually a time of celebration, became a source of stress. Many families planned to cut back on gifts and festivities, hoping to stretch their dollars further. Businesses like Kids 2, a toy maker, faced mounting costs as they paid millions in tariffs. To stay afloat, they had little choice but to raise prices, which only fueled inflation further. This cycle of rising costs hurt both companies and consumers, creating a ripple effect throughout the economy. As frustration grew, public opinion began to turn sharply against the tariffs. What was intended as a policy to protect American workers was now seen as a burden on everyday families. In small towns and big cities alike, economic pain at the grassroots level became impossible to ignore. The hardships faced by ordinary Americans became a driving force behind the growing legal and political backlash against the tariffs. With the tariffs ruled illegal, over $100 billion in collected duties is now in dispute. Companies are fighting for refunds, triggering one of the largest financial battles in recent memory. Lawsuits had already been filed by major firms, but it's unclear if all affected businesses will get their money back. A secondary market emerged, with investors buying refund claims for pennies on the dollar, betting on the outcome. The administration is resisting widespread refunds, citing complexity, and trying to move funds into the Treasury. Businesses are seeking emergency injunctions to prevent this, escalating the legal standoff. The outcome will determine whether American companies are compensated for what the court deemed illegal taxes. The stakes are enormous, with billions hanging in the balance. The end of the tariffs means imported goods should gradually become cheaper, easing inflation for consumers. As prices on everyday items like electronics, clothing, and groceries begin to fall, families may notice their budgets stretch a little further. This change won't happen overnight, but over the coming months, shoppers are likely to see more competitive pricing and a wider variety of products on store shelves. For many households, this could offer some much-needed relief after years of rising costs. Businesses gain stability, no longer facing unpredictable trade barriers, and manufacturers relying on imports will see costs drop. With fewer obstacles in the way, companies can plan for the future with greater confidence, invest in new projects, and potentially pass savings on to consumers. Small businesses in particular may benefit from lower input costs, making it easier to compete both at home and abroad. The removal of tariffs could also encourage innovation, as firms look to expand their product lines and enter new markets. The decision is expected to prompt foreign governments to lift retaliatory tariffs, reopening markets for U.S. exporters. American farmers and manufacturers who have struggled to sell their goods overseas due to trade disputes may soon find new opportunities. This could mean more jobs in export-driven industries and a boost for rural communities that depend on global trade. As international relationships improve, the U.S. could regain its footing as a reliable trading partner. However, industries like steel and aluminum, once protected by tariffs, now face renewed competition from abroad. Domestic producers may need to adapt quickly, investing in technology or finding new ways to cut costs in order to stay competitive. Some workers in these sectors worry about job security, as cheaper imports could put pressure on wages and employment. The government has promised support for affected industries, but the transition may still be challenging. Some business leaders remain wary, fearing the administration may seek new ways to impose trade barriers. There is uncertainty about whether future policies could reverse these gains or introduce new complications. Executives are closely watching for any signs of shifting political winds, knowing that trade policy can change quickly and dramatically. For now, many are taking a cautious approach, balancing optimism with vigilance. Treasury Secretary Bessent insists the tariff agenda is permanent, signaling ongoing uncertainty. While the administration claims this is a long-term shift, some analysts point out that political pressures could force a change in direction. The business community and international partners are left to interpret these signals, unsure if the current approach will truly last. This ambiguity makes it difficult for companies to make long-term investments with full confidence. The ruling repairs some global relationships but leaves questions about the future direction of U.S. trade policy. Allies welcome the move, seeing it as a step toward greater cooperation, but they also wonder how stable this new era will be. As negotiations continue, the world will be watching to see if the U.S. remains committed to open markets or reverts to protectionism. The outcome will shape not just trade, but broader diplomatic ties for years to come. The transition will be bumpy for some sectors, but overall, the decision marks a major shift toward open markets. Workers and businesses will need to adapt to new realities, learning new skills or changing strategies to stay competitive. While some will face hardships, others may find new opportunities in a more dynamic and interconnected economy. The coming months will test the resilience and adaptability of American industry. The debate over protectionism versus free trade is far from settled. As policymakers, business leaders, and citizens weigh the benefits and risks, the conversation will continue to shape the nation's economic future. For now, the end of tariffs signals a new chapter, one filled with both promise and uncertainty. The Supreme Court's ruling is a major blow to President Trump, dismantling a signature policy and deepening political divides. Democrats and critics hailed the decision as a win for the rule of law and a check on executive power. Within the GOP, the ruling exposed a rift between pro-trade conservatives and populist nationalists. Public opinion, once split, has shifted against tariffs as their economic impact became clear. The decision is set to dominate the 2026 midterm elections, with both parties framing it as a defining moment. Democrats will campaign on restoring constitutional order. Trump's supporters will decry judicial activism. The battle over America's role in the global economy is just beginning. With the president's main tariff tool gone, the administration is exploring slower, more restrictive legal options for trade barriers. The Supreme Court's decision returns trade authority to Congress, sparking calls to modernize outdated trade laws. The 2026 midterms will shape whether Congress restricts or expands presidential power over trade. In the short term, the focus is on refunds, price adjustments, and rebuilding global trade relationships. The ruling forces a national debate about America's economic future and the government's role in shaping it. The tariff era may be over, but the underlying tensions over trade and globalization remain unresolved. The next chapter in U.S. trade policy will be written by Congress and the American people.